We've got Stephan Jackman, who is the CEO of Alzamend Neuro. Ticker on NASDAQ is ALZN. Let's go ahead and bring him up. How's it going, sir?
Hey, I'm excellent. How are you today?
I'm doing well. We appreciate you for joining us, especially because you had some lovely news last week that we definitely want to cover. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of things, for the folks that might not be familiar, if you'd explain it to me like I'm five, what is it that your company does?
So we're a clinical stage biotech company focusing on treatments and cures for Alzheimer's disease, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, and PTSD. So we're a drug development company.
Yeah, and Alzheimer's, I know some of the viewers, we've talked about it in the past in different interviews, it's kind of hits home for them. So let's kind of dive a little bit into that. How far along are you in your studies and different things like that when it comes to finding a cure or finding something to help with Alzheimer's? Where are we at right now?
So we have two potential treatments for Alzheimer's. We just completed our phase IIA, for our lead therapeutic drug candidate, which is a lithium, basically a next generation lithium. The greatest thing about that product is that last week we came up with news that was pretty much the best thing ever. We've just topped the gold standard, which is fantastic. Lithium has been approved by the FDA since the 1970s. For bipolar disorder, and it's used off-label for major depressive disorder and PTSD. There's been over 500 human clinical trials in lithium and over 5,000 publications. So basically, lithium is well documented and well characterized. So we know everything about lithium. It's the gold standard. It's considered the first-line treatment. However, there's been studies in phase 2 that's been conducted that showed lithium was efficacious, basically effective at reducing plaque buildup within the brain and helping with associative learning and cognition. So it's regularly prescribed at 300 milligrams. We just came up with a dosage that is 240 milligrams effective, much safer dosage. So we're extremely excited about it. I mean, basically, that's why I got into biotech. I've spent almost 8 years in big pharma. And so I wanted to get in from the ground up and, really kind of drive effective treatments and bring something that's kind of like next level, next generation. And this is going to be, massive and very impactful, because when we talk about Alzheimer's, we talk about a little bit over 6 million people. You're talking about bipolar disorder, there's a little bit over 11 million people. Major depressive disorders, 21 million people. And that's just in the United States alone in PTSD. So it's great. But we also have a secondary drug that's just for Alzheimer's alone. And that's for basically it's an immunotherapeutic vaccine that seeks to restore the patient's immune system. As we get older, immune system weakens. We need something that'll help to elevate that and bring it back up to, basically like if you're in your 20s. For lack of a better, analogy.
Yeah.
So, so this is an immunotherapeutic vaccine that pretty much, use your own immune system to pretty much get rid of the plaques within the brain and the body. And we see this as a potential full-on cure for Alzheimer's or a prophylactic for those people, who are prone with the APOE4 gene. So very good.
Yeah. Now, just so I can understand correctly, right? Because again, I'm not in this field, so I'd love to know. The way that I've kind of seen it is, hey, you can have medicine that can do one of three things at the very least. One, go ahead and restore memory that you may have lost. Two, slow down the memory that you're going to lose. Or three, just make sure that, hey, not just a slowdown, but it's not going to happen and it completely stops from kind of deteriorating a little bit more. Which ones are you kind of focused on? Or is there something else I'm missing here in terms of the picture with either of the drugs?
We're focused on all three. And that's the greatest thing. When you talk about lithium, and I mentioned 500 clinical trials in humans that have been conducted already, it shows that it's very efficacious in doing all three. We just have to now continue and go through the motions of getting the drug through the clinic. Of course, the FDA is not going to let you stop at the phase 2. You have to go all the way out to a phase 3, so we're in it for the long haul, basically. And that's for the lithium product. And now, as I mentioned with the immunotherapeutic vaccine, that of itself is a full-on reversal and a cure for Alzheimer's. So, and the good thing about that is that, we've just seen, 2 drugs that have been approved. They're a monoclonal antibody. And the problem with monoclonal antibodies is that they're a one-size-fits-all. They all have basically what you call a primer that tells your immune system what to do. The problem with that is that, you can take it.
Yeah.
You'll be perfectly fine over 18 months. Now, I can take it. and I can hemorrhage in the brain and die. Now, as a caregiver myself, you have to ask yourself, am I going to give it to my loved one? It's a big problem. Our vaccine is more patient specific. Because it's more patient specific, you avoid any kind of side effects because you're treating yourself with your own blood. So I take your blood from your body, spin out the white blood cells, pulse it with our mutant peptide, and create a vaccine tailored to you that goes right back to you.
Interesting. I'm trying to
And so usually you do a phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 when you do drug development. For this drug, we're doing a phase 1/2A. Phase 1 is usually safety. Phase 2, that's when you get into your efficacy. Yeah. Because this is patient specific, we're allowed to do a combined phase 1, phase 2, because we'll get to know really quickly if this drug is not only safe, if it's effective. Because, of course, as patients with Alzheimer's, you have to put it in patients with Alzheimer's.
Absolutely.
We're very happy about that. And for our first drug, the news that we came up with last week for the lithium, we just finished a phase 2A.
Phase 2, right.
In healthy normals as well as patients with Alzheimer's. So we showed that the drug was, extremely safe. So we've de-risked significantly this drug and unlocked the value of it. So it's fantastic. So, and now what that allows us to do is move forward into later stage phase 2 clinical trials for efficacy with Alzheimer's. Now we can also submit INDs and move forward for the indication of bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, and PTSD. Now you have to ask yourself, do you think the product is going to work in patients with Alzheimer's? Oh, sorry. Nope. Let me reverse that. Do you think it's going to work in patients with bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, and PTSD?
Yeah.
It's currently prescribed for.
Right. And I know you mentioned the lithium earlier, and I have a chat member who wanted to ask this question. If you're able to answer, that'd be great. How is a lithium monitored? Is it the same PK of classic drug?
So technically, yes. So lithium is, you have to have your blood monitored, looking for for basically the toxicity within, the system. So it's basically blood monitoring, and, it affects the renal glands. Now we've pretty much came up with a dosage range at 240 as opposed to 300, so 20% less. That will not require that. And basically the safety profile of our product was benign. It was well tolerated, in patients.
Let's talk about the future. I know you mentioned that with the initial drug that we talked about, the first one, you just got done with the phase 2A, correct me if I'm wrong, but you just got done with that. What is next? What is a timeline? Because we talked about the past, we talked about what you're doing now. Let's talk about the future. What does a timeline look like in terms of what investors and potential investors can expect from y'all, whether that's from the FDA clearances, more, announcements, different things like that, anything obviously that is already public? What can we expect?
So in 2023, you'll see 3 INDs that we'll be submitting to the FDA for bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, and PTSD. So we want to go after the low-hanging fruit. Now that we've gotten the maximum tolerated dose for our product at a dosage level that will not require therapeutic drug monitoring, now we can go after the low-hanging fruit into phase 2 clinical trials. So we're looking to submit the INDs for bipolar, major depressive disorder, and PTSD. As we move into 2024, we will see top-line results from our vaccine, which is a combined phase 1, phase 2, and we'll also be moving into efficacy studies for lithium drug, which is in patients with Alzheimer's. And if you were to look up clinicaltrials.gov or PubMed, you'll already see that lithium is very efficacious and beneficial in patients with Alzheimer's. So it's really good. And so when you talk about the 3 biomarkers or the criteria, whether it slows it down, it improves cognition, helps with irritability, associative learning, lithium does all of that. So
last question for you before I turn it over, if that's all right.
No,
we've talked so much about lithium. We've talked about, the 2 different drugs that you're working on to go ahead and, work with Alzheimer's, PTSD as well. We've had multiple, interviews where it's kind of like, hey, folks, you're focusing on Alzheimer's disease, which is obviously such a terrible disease for a loved one or even one yourself to kind of deal with. What do you think kind of gives you the edge or the advantage to go ahead and take market share to a degree that makes you a successful company compared to anyone else that's trying to do a similar thing?
That's a great question. I love that question. So when I talk about lithium, and I talk about there's no other drug on the market that has been studied as much as lithium, where you talk about 500 human clinical trials. We talk about over 5,000 publications. It's well characterized, well documented. We know everything about lithium. Yes, it's off patent and it's so
Right.
prescribed. In the United States, we're talking about a little bit over 3 million prescriptions still a year. It can actually be used by itself as a monotherapy, or it could be used for most antidepressants. It can be used in conjunction to help with suicidal ideation. So when you have thoughts of suicide, etc., you use lithium. So when we talk about Alzheimer's, we want to also talk about, basically neurodegenerative diseases and psychiatric disorder. We want to talk about something that can help, something that's been here, for a long time, that we really haven't been able to unlock the potential of it and the benefits
Yeah.
of it. And it's lithium. It's kind of like, why reinvent the wheel when you can really improve the wheel and make it that much better? And I think that's exactly what the inventors of our technology and the scientists who have been working on this product have been able to do. We've been able to really unlock the potential and create pretty much a gold mine. So we're in it for the long run. So at this point, we see it as we're just going through the motions. The FDA is not going to let you, put out a drug. Yes, you've gotten to a dosage that will not require drug monitoring, and it's much more effective, and potentially you can pop it like Tic Tacs, but you also want to make sure that you finish your phase 2s, finish your phase 3, submit the NDA to the FDA to get approval, so before we commercialize the product. But it's really...
How long till then, do you think? Till the commercial act? How long till like my grandmother or my mom or whoever can go ahead and get this prescribed? How far away do you think we are from that?
So I would say we're pretty much, I would say at 2 to 4 years. It's one of those things that, because it is lithium, I don't want to get into the intricacies of things, but, but we're allowed to use the regulatory pathway 505(b)(2) because the active pharmaceutical ingredients of our product, because it is lithium, it's a known entity, and it's been basically a plethora of human clinical trials. You're allowed to pretty much skip a lot of steps, and bridge the gap with safety and efficacy studies as well. So we're allowed to minimize the amount of patient population, the amount of patients you use in your clinical trials. So it's just more partnering with the FDA and to see how now we can really expedite the development of this product and commercialize it. So we're extremely happy with this one.
And to achieve that type of greatness, obviously is not cheap, right? So are you confident with the financials of the company to go ahead and be able to kind of take care of business here?
Well, I think it's when we talk about a biotech is always in constant mode of raising money. You have to, so in order to commercialize a product, it's going to take, it's not going to be as much as big pharma because, of course you can, trim the fat and keep it lean. And we have been really good stewards of the capital that we've raised thus far, but we will need to, raise, when we went public in 2021, we raised funds to complete a phase 1 with both therapeutic drug candidate. We have surpassed, we've gone past that, phase 1, with the capital that we have. So in the future, we will need to raise capital, in order to commercialize both of these products.
Yeah,
but,
makes perfect sense.
But the good thing is now we know we have a product that we should raise money to commercialize. It doesn't make sense that, if you go through clinical trials and you realize the product doesn't work and you keep raising money and beating a dead horse. But now, being that we've just topped the gold standard, that's a huge win for us. And it tells us that now we can continue and actually be good stewards of the capital and really go out there and say, hey, this is the reason why we're raising new capital.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
This product is real.
It reminds me of how, the way that I view biotech companies and pharmaceuticals and things like that. It's kind of like how my mom treated me growing up. It's like, hey, if you achieve this, I'll give you this much money. If you achieve this, I'll give you this much, because there's no point of giving me all that if I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. So I totally get where you're coming from on that. Well, look, yeah, we've talked so much, right, about various topics here, but I did want to at least go ahead and give the floor over to you in case there was something I missed that you wanted to talk about with our viewers. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think that the message is, we talk about a message of hope. 2020 and the whole COVID have created a huge mental health crisis, or at least bring light to it. And I think at this point, having a product that's top to gold standard and having a lithium that will not require therapeutic drug monitoring, and it's much safer, We're talking about patients, 20, talking about 3 million prescriptions a year of lithium that can also be used either by itself or in conjunction for major depressive disorder, PTSD, bipolar disorder. We're talking about 35 million, Americans and over 600 million people globally. It's leaving a message of, we want to create a message of hope and let people know that we're here, we're working on it, and it'll be available. And we're not going to stop. We're unrelenting. And we're going to continue until we commercialize this product.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. That is Stephan Jackman, who is the CEO of Alzamend Neuro. Ticker on NASDAQ is ALZN. Mr. Jackman, thank you so much for joining us. And I do look forward to more conversations as you go through different phases and trials. And hopefully,
thank you so much.
In 3 years, we'll be recapping what we just did here.
We're looking forward to it. Thank you.